Everybody wants to know if they have great muscle building genetics, especially if you're a beginner. The reason is because we cannot deny the fact that genetics holds a big weight in terms of how we'll look in the future, how fast we'll build muscle, and overall how fast we'll see progress. And what does everybody want to do? See progress as fast as possible. That's why in this video, I'm going to provide to you 5 signs that you might have great muscle building genetics. So if you have at least 3 out of these 5 signs I'm about to tell you, then chances are you probably do. I truly believe genetics holds about 50% of your future results, whereas training holds about 20% and dieting around 30%. I believe that's a fair percentage that we can base upon how fast we'll build muscle, how our body will look once we actually build muscle. And that's why genetics is so important. Even looking at professional bodybuilding at a high level is purely a battle of genetics. You guys can deny it all you want, but there's no more really strategy when it comes to professional bodybuilding. That's why I believe if you do bodybuilding as a sport, you must have great genetics in order to exceed at it. And most of the fitness influencers you guys look up to, for the most part, are in the top 10% when it comes to genetics. All right, so sign number 1 is the fact that your parents are muscular. It's just in your genes to have great muscle building genetics. Look at your dad, look at your mom, especially if they combine and they're athletes or they were bodybuilders in the past. You scored the luck of the draw, my friend. Like, this is actually so rare, but not even a case if they were bodybuilders. Just look at your parents' frame. Like, do they naturally just tend to hold muscle a little easier? Is your dad more of a stocky sort of guy? You know, 5'6", 5'7", just great proportions, probably has never worked out a day in his life. This stuff gets passed on. And I've seen countless of times where most times the parents were athletes and then their son or daughter is also highly into athletics because they're naturally good at it due to their genetic predisposition. Not only that, but if your parents were into working out, then more than likely they got you into working out at a relatively young age. So you honestly just got a head start in comparison to everybody else. I know me, for example, if I was to ever have a son, best believe they will be introduced to calisthenics fairly early. We'll be doing push-ups together, we'll be doing pull-ups together, and they're gonna max out their stats when it comes to their elementary physical fitness tests. So if your parents are muscular, definitely a good sign. Sign number 2 is the fact that you were just muscular as a teenager. I've told this story before, but I've always had an interest in like people who had like more muscular bodies, especially the athletes, but I didn't really realize it until I saw this guy who was my neighbor in 5th grade, and I would see him kind of mowing his lawn, but I was like, bro, how is this dude so ripped? Like, I've never seen this in person at this point in time. And I remember I asked him, I was like, bro, what do you do to get big arms or ripped chest, abs? What do you do? And he was like, yeah, I just do 10 push-ups before bed. Guys, I was doing 10 push-ups before bed for at least 3 months, and I saw no progress for multiple reasons. But that's a clear sign that that guy just had great genetics, bro, and he wasn't even a teenager. We were like 12 years old. I also remember that we would have these arm wrestling competitions at lunch in middle school. And actually, I was always one of the strongest kids in arm wrestling. And that's due to my genetic makeup, and my arms were pretty strong. My biceps always had a little bit of fullness to it too. And so if you find yourself just being naturally more ripped, more lean, more athletic, as a teenager, like looking back, and you really didn't do that much, then obviously that's a clear sign that once you do actually take fitness seriously, whether it be calisthenics, weighted calisthenics, or even bodybuilding, you're just absolutely going to blow up. What's funny is that a lot of fitness influencers, including myself, will post our before pictures, and sometimes people will say our before pictures is what some guys are trying to get to, but our before pictures is the thing that we looked like naturally as teenagers. Like, I thought I was a skinny teenager, but some guys look at me and was like, bro, you look athletic, like the base, the shape, and all that stuff was there, and I had no idea at the time. So if you're in that position, just know you're one of the lucky ones. Number 3, we gotta talk about muscle insertions and bellies. We talked a little bit about it when I was talking about arm wrestling, how I always had a full or more longer bicep, but this is more in terms of how you actually look once you build that muscle upon your frame. For one, we got our skeletal frame, which is what the muscle sits on, but you also have the attachment of the muscle itself. So obviously we got our bicep attachment, we got our triceps, we got how capped your shoulders are. And you know, guys, you can have have like good and bad things depending on your certain genetics, but some people have like just great attachments, great muscle fullness, muscle bellies. Like they just look full all the time and they're completely natural. It's absolutely crazy. Now, most of you guys will have one or two things that look really great on you, but also you might have one or two things that are pretty bad. Me, for example, my calves, I have a really high set calf insertion. My leg genetics are not the best, but that's just the way it is, right? And also, just because you have great muscle bellies and insertions doesn't really mean you have great muscle building genetics too. Once again, this is what your body looks like once you actually build the muscle upon your frame. And for that reason, some people naturally have an easier time looking bigger than some other people with the same amount of muscle purely because of their insertions and muscle bellies. Now, sign number 4 is the fact that you have favorable fat distribution. This is one of the things that I didn't realize probably until like 2 years ago. I just assumed that everybody tend to gain weight around their midsection and their face, but then I realized that's just for me. Now, of course, those are common areas, but some guys, honestly, it takes them literally getting to like 17% body fat before they have no abs. And that's the fact that they store their fat in other areas. Listen, women are the same exact way. You know that girl you're really attracted to? It's probably because of her body type and her body shape, and you don't even realize it, outside of her face, of course. And that's because even some women have favorable fat distribution to where they naturally tend to store more fat around their hips and their buttocks, and for that reason, keeping their waist slimmer, thus giving them that hourglass shape. However, take a woman with not so good genetics, her fat is just distributed in other areas, kind of spread more out. She's not gonna have the same shape and thus not gonna have the same appeal. It's just the way it is. And that's another reason why you really can't compare yourself, because everybody's so unique, man. Everybody has such different genetics, such different fat distribution. These things you really can't change or control. Just diet down, get a little bit leaner, is what it is. Now, sign number 5, and this one always tugs at people's feathers, but let's be real, guys. It's the fact that you have West African DNA. You have black in you, African in you, which most African Americans do. A lot of African Americans naturally tend to have more West African DNA, and it has been shown multiple times that people with West African DNA might have a slight advantage when it comes to building muscle. And there's a reason why this is actually a stereotype. However, some black guys get a bad rep because the fact that they build a great physique, sometimes that isn't respected because of that stereotype. Keep in mind, the hard work is still the same. You still gotta, diet, you still gotta train well. But for the West African DNA, he might get the same progress you make in 4 years within the next 2 years. And also because he has darker skin, they tend to look a little bit different. The muscle tends to show a little bit more. But seriously, look at athletics, even look at professional bodybuilding. For the most part, African Americans, specifically those with the West African DNA, tend to dominate almost every single sport, like boxing, professional bodybuilding, football, basketball, soccer. I feel like if black people wanted to play soccer, they would dominate that too. Like, let's be real. But the fact that they don't play soccer, then that's probably why not. But excluding just West African DNA, every race has their own advantages, and this is actually a whole separate video. Some people from different white cultures or European cultures tend to have more advantages towards strength, more so than muscle building. And then there's so many different genetic advantages depending on what race you are. However, as we said before, it's an undeniable fact that if you do have West African DNA, you might be at an advantage of building muscle. All right, so remember, even if you have average or below average genetics, you can still make the most out of your personal body. Just understand that if you do have some of these signs, you might excel just a little bit faster, but at the end of the day, we all still reach the same point. All right, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe, like, and I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Peace.